my fellow Ohio brethren. We did it. We won the national championship. Way to go.
You are just lying to the audience. You're lying to our valued members of the show. And that's a complete step back of your position.
Well, it's just
talk about stolen valor.
Yeah.
So there's a fight.
Stolen valor, Nick.
I'm on my Brian Kelly arc right now with some stolen. No, you guys. All right. No, I'll get into it. I'll tell you my real feelings about all of this in the national championship game and kind of what went down. Scott, though, as a real fan of one of the teams that was playing in the game, Notre Dame fan and a Notre Dame family, talk to me. How are you feeling? Not even getting too much into the X's and the O's of the game just yet. We'll get into that. But how are you feeling right now? And where do you stand with the Fighting Irish?
I feel wounded. Absolutely wounded. Just licking the wounds right now. Boy, that was a tough one to watch, especially the first half. And the momentum stopped dead after that first drive. We just could not move the ball. I know we don't want to go into X's and O's, but that's my only defense mechanism right now is to just start talking ball. It's so painful right now, man. And you brought it up. I think it was last episode or the one that we went really hard on Ohio State fans and everything like that. To which we may owe an apology, but I'm not going to be the one to apologize because I don't care. It was a tale of two games or a tale of two halves. Excuse me. First half, Ohio State had our number. Second half, we won that half. So ultimately, if we put a complete game together as they did, I think this would have been a much closer game. And honestly, yeah, they won by 11, sure. But, we had a doinked field goal that was just a chip shot that could have changed the momentum and the entire trajectory of that second half in a much more Notre Dame leaning way. All in all, yes, Ohio State, you won. You got your flowers. Congratulations. We'll see you next year.
Okay, there we go. And Notre Dame is actually looking good to reload for next year. Mm-hmm. I would like to, I will extend an olive branch to our Ohio viewers because we rustled some feathers last week and it was kind of purposefully so. We're being provocative on purpose, but dude, we're like, right now I'm Conor McGregor post-fight that he lost. Pre-fight, talking a lot of mess, being loud and obnoxious and noisy, but after the fight, you gotta shake the hand of the other team and tell them they did a good job. And honestly, you got to give your props to Ohio State. I'm throwing this graphic up right now here. Scott, will you share it, please? Ohio State is the most deserving champion in the history of college football, this tweet says. They've beaten every single team in the top 8 in the final rankings except for Georgia, and they did it with an average margin of victory of 15.5 points. Mm-hmm. Ryan Day rewrote the narrative. He's a legend, they say. So, yeah, the thing is, this is a very, very impressive stretch, probably one of the more impressive stretches of wins. I mean, they beat Indiana, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Penn State, Texas, and Oregon. And it was not a cakewalk for Ohio State.
Yeah.
And also they went through, we've been talking about all the adversity kind of like that Notre Dame went through early on losing to NIU. Ohio State similarly has had their adversity with two really big losses, one of them being incredibly heartbreaking not so long ago against Michigan. So you do got to give the props to Ohio. And I know I poked fun at the Ohio versus the world narrative, and in doing so, I kind of reiterated and reinforced the point of Ohio against the world. And so I do slightly apologize, not all the way, but more so I just wanted to tell you guys congrats. Scott, how you feel about that? Do you think I'm backtracking and just brushing with the wind?
Yeah, stand your ground, Nick. Stand your ground. Do not apologize to anybody. We can have opinions too as fans. This is what's so frustrating is when fans just say like, "Oh, you're an idiot for believing or cheering for a whole nother team and degrading another." It's just like, dude, you do it all the time. But going to this point, yes, this was a historic run. And we've been loud about the fact that Ohio State has gone on an absolute tear ever since that Michigan loss. Like, they have been lights out offensively, and defense has been good all year, but they clamped down in an incredible way, especially against all of these opponents. The crazy thing is I think the margin of victory was way bigger against Tennessee. I think they beat them by 25. Texas beat them by 14 here in the college football playoff. So the margin of victory against the SEC teams was massive. And I think that's a red flag for SEC moving forward.
Yeah, dude. I mean, we also, I gave Ohio and my Ohio State fans here an apology. We owe Indiana an apology as well for some people calling them frauds and saying, oh, they had a cakewalk schedule, what have you. The two teams that they lost to were the two teams in the national championship game. And we have got to give them their props. Indiana was legit there. And this is another example of how we have to let everything play out, like you like to do, Scott, with the quarterbacks, before we make concrete judgments on what our real opinions are on some of these situations or these teams. Looking though at the game, I mean, that first drive, we talked about it, what Notre Dame needed to do, and that first drive was absolutely perfect. I'm going to throw up
beautiful.
here like 18 plays, I think it was, and I'm going to have this graphic in 1 second. 18 plays, 75 yards, and nearly 10 minutes on time of possession, which is exactly what everyone was saying Notre Dame needs to do. However, it was just not sustainable. Like Marcus Freeman after the game, when they interviewed him and asked why they didn't keep running Riley Leonard like that. I mean, I think they ran him 8-9 times on that first drive alone. It's like, you can't do that with your quarterback the entire game. But that was a great example of coming out there and sticking to the plan. But unfortunately, they just couldn't keep that up. I mean, it's impossible to keep up something like that.
Well, I think you can't, you don't do that because, during the regular season, because you're worried about the longevity of your quarterback over the course of the season. You do it in the championship game. You do whatever it takes to win in the championship game, regardless of, the quarterback can be a little beat up at the end of the game, but this is the optimized way to run the offense right now, and it's working. You don't go away from that because maybe he'll be extra sore after this game. Who cares? It's the championship.
Okay, Mikey, so interesting. You're putting a little bit of blame on Mr. Marcus Freeman there.
Yeah, I don't think you need to be overprotective of your players in the championship game. I understand, you're working on the longevity of the team when you're mid-season and worried about how are people going to hold off in the playoffs and when we get to these really important games. But once you're there, it's all out, balls to the wall, everything you got.
All or nothing.
Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, look, from a player standpoint, I was actually thinking about that as well as the game was unfolding and as we were getting our ass handed to us in the first half. It was just like, how did we go away from this ball? The offensive line set an amazing tone in that first drive. They gave Riley, when he did drop back and pass the ball, they gave him stupid amount of time, and obviously running the block was incredible. Going back to Riley and how Marcus utilized him beyond that, I think it's a larger question. He was probably thinking about the rest of the game, right? Because the way that he was getting hit and the way the body language that he kind of had, he was looking a little lethargic and tired after that long drive. I think that's what kind of scared Marcus in a way. Maybe not scared isn't the right word, but it made him rethink that approach. And how many times can you do that within a half to where he's to such a degraded level for the second half to where you're actually getting poor performance on the offense? So I totally understand what you're saying from a player's perspective. Like, you give it everything you got. Like, the future is not a guarantee. This is the moment that you're in. This is the game that you have been given to play at this moment in time. So put everything on the line at this point. But at the same time, you got coaches thinking about the second half. And then you probably have people in the camp of Riley Leonard thinking about what's his longevity maybe in the potential for the NFL and all that kind of stuff. And if he gets hurt in this, does that destroy his draft stock and so on and so forth? So I think there are a multitude of levels, but from a player's perspective, I don't doubt that Riley wanted to continue to play as hard as he was in that first drive. And he did. He played lights out in the second half, or, at least with all the heart he possibly could. So it's just a strange situation. And I think a lot of that overthinking came into it.
Overthinking. This brings me back, just to give you from a little bit of a defensive perspective on a drive like this. Mike, you remember the 2022 German Bowl? Scott, we were with the Schwäbisch Hall Unicorns playing in the championship game in Germany. And the opening drive of the championship game, they went on a huge drive just like this. Yeah. I don't think it was 18 plays, but it was 15 or 16 plays and ate up about 10 minutes of clock. And I'm a linebacker, a defender going against this. And all I remember thinking is, oh my gosh, I hope they don't keep this up and keep doing this the next drive, because they marched all the way down there, scored on us. And thankfully they changed their strategy. I don't know why. And so it's kind of similar here. It's just, as a defensive player, it's kind of a relief that they don't stick to it right there.
Oh yeah. I can imagine the defenders are just sucking wind at this point, dude. 10 minutes.
Especially Nick, he does no cardio.
Wow.
This is the longest drive ever. What is this, 5 plays?
I'm used to 3 and outs, okay? So anything over that is just, and then there's
Scott,
just
the
nothing
other thing
more.
On your point about them So, like, okay, you can make the argument they're worried about, okay, is he going to hold up in third quarter, fourth quarter? When you're down by 3 and 4 possessions in the first half, you're not thinking that far ahead. You're too far ahead of thinking. You're thinking this game is out of hand now. How do we stop the bleeding now? And then deal with it later.
Yeah,
But
I
understand
completely
both
agree
sides.
with you in that sense. Like I too was I was struggling with the approach there in the switch up after we dominated that first drive. It was just like, what happened? It all comes down to the team that makes the most big plays. And Ohio State ended up doing that. They took advantage of, as you brought up, Nick, Notre Dame's affinity for going man to man.
Yes.
With the weapons they have on the outside and at the skill positions, it was just, you can only stop it so many times until there's a break because they're so good. It's like they're going to get theirs. So how do you scheme against that? And Ohio State took advantage of it. Chip Kelly utilized all his weapons to the best of their ability, and that ultimately ended up being the dagger, I think. They just had more big plays.
Yeah. The thing is, we have to, I mean, I really admire the way Notre Dame played in this because, okay, they came out strong. They had that first drive that everyone's like, oh man, they're really going to do it. They're going to play with Ohio State here. And then it got out of hand. And I think that's when Ohio State went 31 unanswered points. And at that point, when it's 31-7, it's just, you're looking this in the face like, oh man, we're getting blown out in the championship game. But they didn't give up at all. Like they continued to have that heart and that fight throughout the entire game and scratched and clawed their way back to the point where they were like within one score, and it was actually a reasonable situation that, hey, maybe they're going to come back from it. It would have been one of the most amazing comebacks since the 28-3 comeback in the Tom Brady Atlanta Falcons Super Bowl. But the fact that they were even in the conversation at the end there, I think that's a huge testament to the Notre Dame squad, to the culture of that squad, and of course to Coach Marcus Freeman for setting that tone.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head there. They had the fight. They never gave up, and you felt it, especially in the second half. The first half, I think they were just getting absolutely destroyed by haymakers from the Ohio State offense, as I was just alluding to. But in the second half, they got up, they got off that corner chair and started fighting again. And I mentioned the missed field goal, the doink and all that kind of stuff. And that could have absolutely changed the momentum of the game, because then you go from a 2-touchdown score game to, something far more manageable. Because if you put up a touchdown, it's a 3-point game with plenty of time left in the fourth quarter. So it was this close to being something different.
Would you have gone for that on fourth down instead of kick that field goal? I know hindsight's 20/20, and you're like, once he missed the field goal, you're thinking, oh man, why did we even kick the field goal? But with that information that you had, would you have gone for it on fourth down or kicked the field goal?
I don't have enough Dan Campbell in me to do that. So I would have taken the points at that moment, because of exactly what I was just talking about. Is like, if you don't get that, chances are it's going to be the end result as we just saw. But if you did get that field goal, which was a much higher percentage of you probably getting that based off of how the offense had been performing and moving the ball to that point, like if you just took the points, you're going to be in a much better situation. The defense is going to feel a little energized. They could get another turnover. Hindsight's 20/20. You would always want to go for the touchdown instead of the 3 points.
I think the field goal was the right decision. You want to stack your momentum as much as you can in a situation like that where you're crawling back. Because if you miss that fourth down attempt, the deflation to the team is so much heavier than just taking 3 points. Of course, you have to assume you're making those field goals.
What's a bigger deflation, missing the field goal or going for it on fourth down and not getting it? Which one deflates you more?
I think missing the field goal deflates you more, but in terms of the decision making, you can't think about you can't think about the percentage of making the field goal the same way as the percentage of making the fourth down, just from a decision making standpoint.
Yeah. But hey, I completely agree with you there, Mikey. I think missing the field goal, the probability was so much higher in you making that chip shot field goal than you getting the fourth down conversion. So I totally get it. If you're going to bring up the fact that Jeter was the worst kicker in college football, I would say that's an element that we haven't discussed yet.
Is that true? Is he actually?
I'm not gonna bring that up. Is he actually the worst?
Okay, that changes everything.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame was barely at 50% on the year for field goals.
If they're 50, they were 75% on fourth down conversions in that game. You statistically have a better chance of getting it on fourth down than kicking a field goal.
I know.
So that's a little bit frustrating. Okay, yeah, that's a little bit frustrating, and that did kind of deflate them and hinder their comeback there. But it was impressive though the way that they were scratching and clawing back, dude. I was so impressed with Greathouse. He was just showed up big
Nuts.
time. Like, I think that he didn't have that many touchdowns throughout the season, but then he had these touchdowns in this game. It was just super clutch performances. Like, the thing is, Notre Dame brings back a lot of talent too. Actually, I've got a graphic right here that shows how much Notre Dame is bringing back. Let me throw it up here in a second.
Yeah, talking to Greathouse, man. His second half was unbelievable. 6 catches in the game, 128 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like, he was the X factor for Notre Dame's fight, as we were talking about. And it's a shame that Riley and him weren't able to connect more often in the first half, just to get momentum or to feel like there was a chance for the offense to start moving the ball after that first drive. But dude, Greathouse had a night, man.
Yeah, he was legit. And here's for those just listening, Notre Dame just played a $20 million roster close in the national title game with 7 starters missing. Notre Dame returns 18 starters. 16-0 isn't really unreasonable. So the future is bright for Notre Dame. Okay. Like, there's a lot to be excited about. And honestly, I think the pressure was more on Ryan Day in this situation. Like, he had to win that national championship. And dude, I know I was kind of taking jabs at Ohio State and Ryan Day in that last episode last week, but Ryan Day deserves a lot of props, and I'm going to give it to him here. I got to give it to him. Look at this. Ryan Day, in 1988, he was 8 years old. He lost his dad to suicide. Imagine that as an 8-year-old kid. Absolutely heartbreaking, devastating. And that's at such a formative age. And then on that same day, January 20th, 2025, how many years later is that? 42? What? I can't do it. What is that math, Scott? 37? You went to Yale.
I'll carry the 2.
Yeah. On the same day, however many years later, he wins the national championship. And it's kind of a beautiful moment there. And everything that I do hear about Ryan Day is that he is incredible with the young men that he recruits and gets on that football team. He's a great family man. And we do got to give him his props here and shine that spotlight on what he did at the program that maybe has the highest expectations of all college football programs, dude. I mean, Ohio State has the biggest fan base. They have the most alumni, and your expectation is national championship level stuff year in and year out. And it's like, there's still even some people who are harping on him this year. I mean, simply because he didn't win the Michigan game, even though he won the national championship. But this dude, there's such high expectations there, dude.
Yeah. Look, it's one of those things. Ryan Day, I've never had a problem with at all, and I've honestly thought that the shit he gets is unnecessary for how good he and how well he has performed and how well he has coached his teams. Losing against your rival, it's bragging rights and everything like that, but at this point in time, I think he's overcome that. And regardless of him beating Michigan next year or not, I think he's earned himself quite some time at the helm of Ohio State, especially this being, as you touched on earlier, this being the first year where it's like the champion feels as though it was so well deserved because they went through the throes of the 12-team college playoff. They weren't the top seed. They had to battle. They had to do all of these things and fight through the adversity after the Michigan loss. And they showed, or at least Ryan Day showed, how good of a coach he is to right the ship, put them back on track so that they could get this W and this massive W at that. So I've never had a problem with Ryan Day. I've always come to his defense. At least, I don't know, everybody else can fact check me on that based on the other episodes. The only thing I've ever had a problem with him on is going after and lashing out, because he has so many people on his back, lashing out at an old 80-plus-year-old man in Lou Holtz when he says something. It's like, you have 10 million other people saying something about you. Why don't you get mad at them instead of the 80-year-old man?
So you do have a problem.
That's the only thing. It's just like, but I get it. It's like, he has so much pressure. There had to be an outlet. He found the weakest link and went for him. And it was a old man.
There you go. Yeah. Poor old guy. Will you throw this graphic up here, please? Because just as I said, there are still some people who are, harping on Ohio State. And some people are calling this the most fraudulent national champion in the college football playoff era. And for those just listening, we have a Venn diagram here of the recent college football national champions, okay? And one of the boxes is they lost to an unranked opponent. One of them is they lost to their big rival. One of the boxes is they did not win their championship, their conference championship. Ohio State fits in the middle because it had all three of those. It lost to an unranked opponent in Michigan, also its rival in Michigan. It did not win its conference championship in the Big Ten, but it did win the national championship. So some people are saying, oh, this is not a pure national championship victory. I would actually argue the opposite. I think that this actually elevates the win, showing that you've actually gone through, tough times in the season. It wasn't just this shiny, perfect season. You came in the playoff as the 6th seed or the 7th seed, whatever it was, and had to battle through a juggernaut gauntlet of different top teams and fight your way to the championship game and then win it. So I would actually argue the fact that they weren't in this pristine position here and just had an easy coast into the national championship game says the opposite. What do you think about that?
Yeah, dude, fraudulent. That's pretty aggressive. I mean, they went, like I just said, they went through the first 12 team CFP. And as you were talking about, they didn't have an easy road to make it there, being the seed that they were. They didn't have the Penn State road to get to where they were. They had to fight through some solid teams. And on top of that, they wiped the floor with them. Like, it wasn't even close, any of the games up until this championship game. So, like, the fraudulent noise is kind of wild. And nobody's ever saying that about any at-large bid team who's ended up going on to win the NCAA basketball tournament. Everybody cheers for that, right? It's like, okay, they didn't win their conference championship. They didn't get that automatic bid, but they found a way to win enough in the season to earn their spot in the playoff. And then from there, they performed exceptionally and to a stellar degree, and they ended up winning it. And people are like, oh, that's great. So not having the same energy toward Ohio State winning here is kind of weird.
Yeah. Mike, what are you smiling so big about?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the guy who made this diagram. All of the research. First of all, who is this guy? Just some guy on Twitter does all this research, thinks, what's the best graph to display my argument? He went down the list. Bar graph, pie chart. No. Venn diagram is going to get my point across and put this out to the world. How deep do you have to dig data-wise to try to discredit someone who just got the success? This is just a bitter man.
Yeah. I do respect the Venn diagram, though. It's actually one of my favorite ways to receive displayed information. So I would actually put that, pie graph is solid, but like a Venn diagram can really explain something clearly to me.
Okay, interesting. Well, in top 5 favorite graphs, go.
Okay, all right. I don't know that many graphs.
Our new segment. We'll save it for next week.
Okay, that's a good. We'll prepare our top 5 favorite graphs or information displays. Scott, I'm sure you learned a bunch of those at Yale.
I'm a big fan of parabolas.
And you lost me. Okay. Next segment.
Okay, parabolas. I wanted to, while we're on college football, okay, there's kind of a shift in tide with the powers that be in the college football world. Obviously, it's been the SEC, it's been the South all these years, and now we've seen a large turn to the Northern teams, to kind of the Big Ten teams, and of course, Notre Dame independent team. And there seems to be a little bit of a, it's changing. And a lot of people do attribute this to the fact that perhaps the South, the SEC, were participating in some sort of NIL type activities before it was strictly legal. Now it's totally legal, and these other schools are able to participate in NIL activities and pay their players. Saw that there, Ohio State, it has the largest student body alumni base in the country, and a lot of their NIL collective money comes from that. So they're able to put together a $20 million roster. I'm wondering, because a lot of people are accusing the South and the SEC of doing this beforehand. Is this sort of a moral implication on our southern states and our southern schools that they're being accused of this? And where do you stand on this, Scott?
Look, I think it's disingenuous for people to really harp on Ohio State for having a $20 million roster this year, because let's be frank, the majority of teams that made it to the CFP had a number very similar to that, at least north of 15 million. So it's a little disingenuous to jump on them strictly for that. But before the NIL era, multiple things can be true at the same time, right? So I'm not going to deny that there was probably backhand or backdoor deals that were being had by SEC teams for I don't know, the past 40, 50 years, because it's been happening. We've known it to happen. My dad's mentioned it in his recruiting process back in college. Like, there were many, many people out there willing to make deals, and backdoor deals at that, willing to offer people cars, money, whatever it is. And the way in which they call it launder that money to the individuals is interesting. But so I'm not going to deny that was happening. But at the same time, I think there was an element that the SEC had that no other conference necessarily had as well. So even when you did bring those people in, there was an attraction and a lure for recruits, even if they weren't good enough to necessarily be paid, or even if they weren't good enough to be paid but didn't get paid, they would still go to the SEC because they realized the level of competition there was at a much higher level, and the chances of them making it to the NFL was at a much higher level. So there are a multitude of factors here, and I think I would like to say that the latter was more influential for people going and continuing to play in the SEC, and that talent being as good as it was for a long time. But I'm not going to deny that there was not money being passed around. And I'm not going to point fingers at a specific team, but I think a lot of them were doing that to a certain degree.
It's interesting to also look at the departure of somebody like Nick Saban, an absolute legend in college football, who saw the writing on the wall. And apparently within circles down there, once the NIL stuff started to become a reality, Saban basically said, hey, there's no way in hell that we are going to be able to compete with a school like Texas. Texas, that's oil money. They got big bucks there, and they're going to be able to have a massive NIL collective that Alabama is just not going to be able to match. And so it's interesting to see his decision to depart from college football at that time. Then how much is this just going to turn into, okay, whichever school buys the biggest, best roster, spends the most money on the roster, that's going to be our national champion?
Look, I don't think that's necessarily true in the game of football, because we experience some of that in all the professional sports. I mean, baseball I look at specifically because there's not a cap on teams and salaries and everything like that. And you got a lot of teams who just spend a boatload of money but don't always win. And it's the same with the NFL. You can allocate certain dollars to get a stellar roster, but that doesn't mean you're actually going to win it. It gives you a better chance, at the very least on paper, for sure. But that doesn't mean that it's ultimately going to be the end result. And going back to Nick Saban and in that point and being like, yeah, we can't compete with Texas. I know he has many reasons for leaving, age being one of them, and everything he had accomplished up until that point. His job was done essentially with that old era of football, and now going into the new NIL era, he felt it was time. But at the same time, it's man, if you're one of the greatest competitors or the greatest competitive coaches we've ever seen, if you really thought that, it feels like a diminishing element to his competitive nature that we all grew to either hate or love. And it was just I wish he stuck it out for another 3-5 years to really see if that would be the case. Cause as a competitor, that's what I want to see. Competitors compete. So for him to just step out because the rules changed feels like a little bit of a cop-out, and a protection of his legacy, and a little bit more of a personal thing than I think we're projecting here. It was just out of the kindness of his heart, he was oh, it's time for somebody else.
I think that it is absolutely the perfect time for him to step away. And I actually respect that he stepped away kind of on top before everything shifted, became a new world, and kind of maybe he would then overstay his welcome in a way that kind of Belichick did. Okay, because I think those final couple of years in New England hurt Belichick's legacy, and Saban's legacy is pristine now, intact, after he walks away before he enters into this NIL world and maybe doesn't perform at the same level that he does. I respect the legacy protection. Okay.
This is the other thing with Saban is the way he coaches is so culturally centric that with this new age of guys getting paid this crazy amount of money and it becoming more professional, you're going to lose that influence over these guys. You're going to lose that ability to force these kids to buy into the program, which is what his legacy is built on, culture. And that's why you see some great college coaches, when they go to the NFL, they can't make the transition because they're too culture oriented. Can't think of any examples, but that's just,
well, Nick himself. I mean, Nick himself, when he went to Miami, it was very clear that his culture building didn't fit in the NFL or that era of the NFL. So that's why he kind of hopped back to get that because he wanted to chase Bear Bryant, right?
Exactly.
He didn't want to become Don Shula.
So in that sense, it makes complete sense for him to preserve the legacy that way and preserve the way that he's coached for so many years.
Yeah, he doesn't want to like totally reinvent his style and what he's built up for all these years just to cookie cutter fit it into the NIL era.
Sure. I concede on all of those points for sure. But there's an element.
That easily.
Yeah. No. But I'm throwing this out here as playing devil's advocate. If you look at what Dabo Swinney has openly talked about and what he's done at the program of Clemson, is he's sticking to more of the traditional route, the culture building, the recruiting element of things, as opposed to picking and plucking people or a majority of their roster from the portal or grabbing people with the NIL money. I mean, they're definitely utilizing that tool, but not to the degree that a lot of other programs are doing it. So like, I actually respect what Dabo's done. We saw, yes, they went through the throes of difficulty over the past 2 seasons, but this year they got something right. And he actually won, got into the CFP and was actually quite successful. So that's what kind of bugs me is we're seeing elements and places that are actually pursuing the old way and still performing to a high level. So it bothers me knowing that Saban is as competitive as he is to just step away. And that's why I point to it. Maybe it's more of a personal protection of his legacy than anything else. Because it's not like he's incapable.
Yeah, I mean, like probably if it was 10 years ago at a younger age, a different point of his career, he'd feel the need to stick it through. But like where he's at age-wise and life-wise, he's like, I don't need to relearn anything and rebuild at this point. I've done
Mike, you are being such an ageist right now. That's me.
I am. I'm a proud ageist.
Okay. All right. So that's it's an interesting conversation. It's kind of ongoing. It'll be cool and curious to see where the SEC kind of lands next year and maybe how this extrapolates out a couple years if the tides really do shift to be more dominant in the Big Ten into different regions of the country. Like we saw all of the champions of every level of college football came from the Midwest this year, none from the South. Let's see if that holds up now here in the NIL era that things have shifted a little bit. We got to talk NFL here. Big news coming out of the Midwest. Let's stick to the Midwest. All we talk about is the Midwest on this show. Can we get a story out of Portland, Oregon, please?
Not good stories coming out of that city lately.
No stories out of our city. Ben Johnson departing his Detroit Lions 2 days after that divisional round heartbreaking loss, and he's staying in division and going to division rival the Chicago Bears to be the head coach. He's got Caleb Williams over there. Scott, give me your thoughts on this. Do you think it's going to work? And also, another question with this, do you have any problem with how this went down, how he did his interviews and how he ended up going there 2 days after their loss?
No, I don't have a problem with that latter portion because I brought it up the other episode being a little frustrated with how things are set up for coordinators or any coaches who are trying to find new jobs if they're in the playoffs and competing. I find that it's a disservice to them, and you got to let them finish out the year, in my opinion. And I think that window of interviews need to be shifted. In terms of Ben Johnson going to the Bears, yeah, pretty wild that he chose to go to an in-division rival. Secondarily, do I think it's going to work? Nah, man. Like, I just don't have the trust in the Bears organization to make sure that everything is at his disposal to succeed. And I find this to be a Mount Everest for him to climb. And it's going to be a Mount Everest anywhere he goes, being a first-time head coach. But at the same time, I just think he's facing massive hurdles at that organization. Granted, there are probably fewer than if he had gone to the Jaguars, which I heard is why he chose the Bears. But at the same time, this is going to be a tough road, dude.
Yeah, okay. I understand that. And obviously there's some organizational issues with the Bears there, and they've been pretty damn mediocre for a while and not been able to have much success at quarterback ever in the history of their organization. Then where would you have gone if you were him, Scott? Like, you don't like him going there to the Bears. I mean, the other options, like obviously he was talking with the Raiders, and there was some rumors going around that Brady was really trying to woo him, as Brady, a partial owner with the Las Vegas Raiders, to woo him there. And there were rumors coming out that was where he was going to go for. So him coming out as being hired by the Bears was a little bit of a surprise. Would you have gone to Las Vegas over this? Because I think, there are a lot of flaws with the Bears job, but they at least have a talented quarterback in place. Raiders, who the hell is going to be the quarterback?
Yeah. No, I mean, between all of or among all of the options that were available, I think this one made the most sense for his offensive mind, because the Bears offense, they have incredible weapons. They drafted really well last year. They got Caleb, they got Odunze. They have Allen, at least for the time being, as well. So they are loaded in terms of offensive weapons. So makes sense that he chose them over the majority of other teams available. I would have probably done that as well if I were in his shoes. But the other option he could have done is to remain at the Lions for another year. That's the big question mark. He did it last year. Yeah, he passed on a couple jobs. But I think what he got was just he was getting anxious and I think ready to jump ship, which is a little surprising based off of how successful the Lions were this year and how well he performed in that offense or creating that offense and how well the players performed in that offense. Look, every organization that has an opening is going to be garbage to a certain extent, right? You're going to be starting from ground zero. But at the same time, as I mentioned a couple episodes ago, Andy Reid's not going to be coaching forever. Like, you got a lot of guys who are in positions of coaching. Who knows? If Tomlin doesn't perform very well, there may be an opening at a well-structured organization in the Steelers in the next year or two. Like, so I always I understand it. Go get yours, but at the same time, there may have been opportunities had you waited another year or two.
I know what you're saying, but already him waiting a year last year was kind of a big deal and a little bit crazy for some people. And why don't you jump at this opportunity to level up? And you just never know what the opportunities are going to be. And, right now he is the hottest coordinator in the NFL, and every team wanted him. They're probably going to be able to get his best contract deal in place. So you're never going to have a perfect scenario, or very rarely a perfect scenario where you have everything you want. Because I did hear that he wanted to have his own pick of kind of GM and team up with a GM that he wanted, but he's not going to have that in Chicago. Yeah. But he does at least get a major market in Chicago and a talented quarterback who we'll see if he can get the best out of Caleb Williams. And what were you going to say? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if a major market is like a huge boon for a first-time head coach. I actually think that could be a problem for a new first-time head coach, because there's so much more pressure on you to succeed immediately, and especially with a guy of his pedigree. So, that's why, like, I always take the approach, yes, you want to get yours. Yes, you don't know what the future holds. But as a coordinator, as a coach, it's a little different than, say, if you were a player. I think if you were a player, yes, go get yours, because the longevity of your career, tomorrow's never guaranteed in that gameplay and injury and all that kind of stuff. But as a coach, you kind of have a little more runway. And yes, he used up a good portion of that after not taking a job last year. But based off of his body of work this year, dude, I don't think interest is going to go away like that.
Yeah, it's also, there's a lot of criticism that he's gone in division here. Lions fans are so upset. Lions fans are really, really pissed. I just threw up a tweet here. This person tweeted, "You were just coaching a different team less than 48 hours ago. The bodies are still warm. This is straight weird." The thing is, though, the Lions have really not been in a position in the last 5, 10, 20 years to have super desirable coordinators. They're getting both their coordinators plucked probably this year. Yeah. And a lot of teams have had this experience. The Lions have just not had good enough coordinators to have this experience. So there's a lot of kind of malice coming from the Lions fans. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think this is fair, or do you think this is unjust to be disgusted at a guy like Ben for leaving?
I think it's fair to be frustrated, but I don't think that frustration should be directed at him. Granted, this does feel a little like college Mickey Mouse sort of moves that college coaches do. They jump ship really quickly, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, Brian Kelly, specifically LSU, all that kind of stuff, doing all of that bullshit a week after leaving Notre Dame in the lurch. But yeah, to your point about, look, the coaching staff at the Lions is just ripe to be plucked by so many other organizations. But what they have going is so incredibly special. And that's why I was hoping that Ben would remain one more year. So I understand the frustration of Lions fans. I just don't think it should be directed at the individual coaches themselves, because as we were just saying, they're going to get theirs. They have opportunities, especially with like a D-line coach going to a DC. That's a huge step up in pay, dude. You got to take that. You can't be mad about that.
Yeah. That's massive there. I think it's tough because the Lions have not been in this position. It's been so special to have the Lions at the top of the NFC here. everyone thought, okay, this is kind of the year. It's pretty shocking that they got bumped in the divisional round against a rookie quarterback. And so now to have not finished it out this year, and now it feels like, okay, we're losing some pieces here. How are we going to look next year? I can understand Lions fans being frustrated about this and a little bit worried, and kind of rightfully so. But Dan Campbell, he's such a great culture guy. Like, he picked those coaches in the first place. He has good selection criteria for his assistant coaches. He's going to replace them in a smart way with guys that fit the culture that they're building there and what they already have roster wise and just attitude wise.
Yeah, and I would say it's not impossible to backfill great coordinators. Like, it's happened before. Bill Belichick did it for many,
it happens all
years.
The time, dude. Guys, like Andy Reid's lost lots of coordinators. Like, you lose coordinators, man.
Yeah.
If you have good coordinators, you're going to lose them.
Yeah. Andy Reid's a little different because he's an offensive genius. I don't know if Dan has that same sort of capability, but he is an incredible culture builder, as we've seen this far. And I think he has guys in the organization right now that he's going to elevate and then bring guys in underneath to then learn the culture, develop underneath it, and then push them forward.
All right. I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, because one of the criticisms of Ben Johnson is, that he's a little bit bookish. All right. Dude went to UNC. Okay. He's a little bit nerdy. He's like one of those Yale guys, right? He went to UNC and he graduated with, I think, a degree in mathematics and computer science. Okay. Smart guy, and obviously smart with all of his offensive whiz and genius that he's put on the football field the last years. So that's the criticism of him, is that sometimes you hire these kind of bookish offensive coordinators to come be first-time head coaches, and it doesn't really work out. I want to get your guys' opinion here on his personality, and if you think that he could actually also be a culture builder at Chicago. This is a video clip of him with his first interaction in the building in Chicago. I'm going to play it. Scott, will you throw it up, please? Sorry, I have the wrong tab up. I'm an amateur. Here we go. 1 minute.
Exactly where we wanted to be. This is exactly where we wanted to be. Where we want you. This is going to be a challenge. I am well aware of that. I know what this division's about, and this is exactly where we want to be. We're going to go after this thing, and it's going to take all of us in this room. It's going to take this locker room. It's nothing more important than that locker room and us serving that locker room and those players. All right? They need to understand that, and they need to feel that from us every single day. And if we do that, the wins are going to come. The playoffs are going to come. All right? Can't wait to get to know you guys, and thank you so much for the warm welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so there's Ben Johnson. His first interaction. I was going to say, nerd or cool?
Okay.
Go ahead, Mike.
The way you set it up, I thought really it was going to be a nerd. But opening with the get back to work joke, you got me.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all. He controlled the room like a veteran comedian. And then transition from humor right into inspirational leadership and setting a culture, I think, already with that, and about serving the players right away. In that short time, everybody knows what he's about. And he did that so quickly. I think he's a great fit.
You like him. You like him because he started off with the humor. Okay.
Completely. And he got me with the joke.
Got you with the joke. Scott, thoughts?
I'm cool with this hire. And what I like is that his message to the organization wasn't directed toward himself. He was using a mirror and reflecting all of the light toward the locker room, which is awesome to hear, and making sure that the focus of the organization is on the roster and the guys that are in that locker room and on the field. Because that's the only way that they're really going to end up getting wins, is if they serve those dudes and put them in positions to win. So
yeah, no, I'm with you guys. The joke, opening up with the joke, that was good. He lost me a little bit at the end where he kind of stumbled and stuttered. I know, I do that all the time on this show, but I'm not paid $12 million like Ben Johnson is. I'm allowed to. So that lost me just slightly. It remains to be seen if he can actually set and build a culture. I mean, there's no doubt about his intelligence and his offensive firepower and wizardry. But is he going to be able to set a culture? I do think he's going to elevate Caleb Williams quite a bit. I think Caleb Williams will take a very big step having a guy like Ben Johnson right there in his ear and them working together. And even Caleb said, this is the type of guy that I wanted. And this is probably best case scenario for a guy like Caleb. So we will see what happens with the Chicago Bears and the poor Detroit Lions.
The good old rookie quarterback telling the organization who he wants at the helm. That always works.
You have a problem. Okay, Scott, so you have a problem with
Did he say that? Did he
expressing what he wants? Do you?
Yeah. No, I don't really have a problem. Like it just irks me a little bit. Like, I get it. You're the leader of the team and everything like that. But it takes about 3 years, I think, for that to really concretize and become, okay, Caleb, you're the man. You can kind of run the show. Like right now, there are a lot of moving parts. So I don't know. That just irks me a little bit that he takes that approach.
Yeah, dude, I do love when a quarterback is just like quiet and doesn't like Jaden Daniels, dude. Like, guy barely ever talks. I don't know anything about Jaden Daniels. He's not hopping on podcasts and stuff. He's just going out there super poised and takes care of business. And he's not, coming up here with all these quotes here. I've got this for the NFC and AFC championship games coming up this weekend. For those just listening, this is a tweet. It says, if the Chiefs win, Mahomes officially becomes the GOAT. If the Bills win, Josh Allen ascends Burrow and Lamar to join Mahomes at the top. If the Commanders win, Jaden Daniels will be immortalized in sports history. If the Eagles win, we'll all just quickly move on with our life. Thoughts on this and the Eagles hate? I'm pro Eagles hates. I'm switching from irking the Ohio brethren.
Oh, you're going after Philly now.
Philly. Okay,
Change your mind.
I'm going after Philly. What are your thoughts on the NFC, AFC championship games coming in this week?
First point, no. Mahomes is not going to automatically become the GOAT. I think the Kansas City Chiefs as an organization are etched into history, of course, being the first to go 3 in a row. But I don't think automatically Mahomes becomes the GOAT. I think he has a lot of time left in his career, and we'll see how that plays out. Because we literally just saw the end of Tom Brady. How can you possibly say that Mahomes is already better than Tom?
But yeah, dude, I'm not sure. I'm not sure really who I'm rooting for here down to the Final Four. I want to get your thoughts. Like we were talking about the Chiefs in the last episode and all the people giving them shit about the refs and all this stuff. What are your thoughts on the Mahomes Kelce combo? Do you like these guys or do they irk you, Scott?
Look, I like what they do on the field. I think it's incredible the connection that they have. I'm never gonna get mad about seeing great football, and what they've been able to produce so far in their careers has been honestly second to none. Outside of maybe Brady and Gronk and that connection that they had. It's been incredible to watch, and just the style in which they do it just feels more freeform, which is always interesting to watch. In terms of like all the pomp and frill and fame and everything that's coming along with them, like that's the irritating aspect of things. But as players, dude, it's actually really cool to watch this stuff happen, and quite honestly, gorgeous to see on the field. So, I was kind of going against Mahomes there about, he's the GOAT and everything like that. I have no problems with Mahomes. It's just like I get frustrated with the immediacy or everybody trying to crown the dudes that are playing right now so soon. Right. The recency bias just frustrates me.
Yeah, you're the anti-immediacy guy. You're the wait and let it play out and let it see before I make a judgment guy. I like that. I'm with you on that for the most. Sometimes I get a little excited. I'm excited about Jaden Daniels. I'm not gonna say anything crazy, but I am excited about him. But I'm with you on let's wait and see here. I like the trajectory of the Mahomes and Kelce. Like, just for those who are listening, we have a highlight here from a really cool angle, one of those top-down shots that all these social media teams are doing now of Mahomes on that really crazy touchdown in the game last weekend. But I want to throw this up because we were talking about the referees and the officials in the last episode, okay? And then a lot of people thinking, okay, the Chiefs are benefiting from calls made or not made in favor of the Chiefs. For those just listening, I've thrown up this graphic here. It shows over the last 7 seasons, which is the Mahomes era, the Chiefs are actually one of the most penalized teams in the NFL over the last 7 seasons. So there's been 135 games that they've played, and their penalty yard different per game is negative 5.13, which puts them at 26th in the NFL. So 26 out of 32 teams They are in the bottom 6 of most penalized teams in the NFL. Thoughts on this? Are you surprised by this at all?
Yeah, I would say I'm surprised by this, but the next question I would have is what is the breakdown of penalties? Is it on the defensive side of the ball? Is it on special teams? Is it on offense? Sure. So like that's really where my question comes from, because you can have a whole boatload of penalties on the defensive side, which skews this entire graph right here. Because if you remove those defensive ones, like right. the issue we have right now, I think the conversation right now is the offensive side of the ball, or opponent defenses getting called for sure. penalties against the Chiefs when they're on offense. So like that's my biggest question. But on its face, yes, this is surprising.
Yeah, that's surprising. Now I do want to direct you to a even more surprising, or maybe not surprising, piece of data on here. If you go down to the playoffs, so that's down about 6 or 7 rows, they jump up from the 26th most penalties team to just the 6th. So in the playoffs, they are way less penalized, and they have a huge positive disparity in their favor of penalty yards that go their way. It's interesting to see that it is so different from regular season to the playoffs. Do you guys think that I try to attribute this is just a mature football team that's very well coached. And, we've seen them. They're kind of screwing off during the regular season, not screwing off, but, they're not putting up their best ball, and they're just doing kind of the bare minimum to win. But come playoff time and come crunch time, they are way more buttoned up. So that's kind of my interpretation of this. What do you guys think?
I agree with that. I think it's more of a representation of that. Their loose and sloppy culture when things don't matter, and then they'll tighten it up when it's crunch time. They'll tighten it up. You go, all right, let's really settle in here. I think it's more of a display of that than anything else.
Yeah. Okay, it's the playoffs, guy. Let's actually try really hard now.
We have to really try this time. You hear me?
Okay. Scott?
Yeah. If I wanted to play devil's advocate and conspiracy theorist, it would be like, okay, the NFL is sitting here and they have a mandate to the refs to say, hey, let's make it look like we're being fair in the regular season. And then come playoff time, let's button it up and let's direct it toward one way.
Sure. I think it's too hard to actually put that into practice as refs. Like, all right, we're going to be really loose for these games and we'll tighten up.
Yeah.
Dude, it's hard.
How hard is it to just throw a flag?
I mean, it depends on your shoulder health. And I don't know how heavy the flag is.
Give me a my
shoulder and elbow. That's help.
You fall into a routine, okay? That's why it gets hard to break the routine.
Scott, you've obviously never
and then muscle memory. That's why it's hard.
Yeah, Scott, you've never officiated 6th grade CYO basketball.
I have never donned the stripes. I have never.
Okay, how dare never donned the
stripes
or worn the whistle of our official fraternity.
Nick wears the whistle when he's home. Still, he takes the character.
I actually walk around downtown Shaw with a ref shirt sometimes, just for old time's sake. There was, dang it, I had one other thing on this that I really wanted to bring up. Dang it, Scott. Oh yeah, it was that. Okay, I know, Scott, you're playing devil's advocate here on some of these things, but it's like with the people who are NFL Chiefs refs conspiracy. It's like, why would the NFL conspire to elevate the 27th biggest market in the sports? It's like, you're gonna do this. Why would you do it for like a big market team? Cheat for the Jets or the Giants, or a team in LA with a huge population. Why would they do it for a team in Kansas City?
Nick, you're overlooking the fact that this is an America's sport. And if you focus on a major market, you lose the fandom of the rest of the country. So pinpointing the 27th largest market and elevating them means all boats rise with that rising tide. So they're able to capture everybody in the country. They get the underdog story of the small market team beating up on the big guys, the big market teams. And that's why they do it, Nick.
So that's why they're cheating. Okay.
Are they really the 26th biggest market?
Something like that. I mean, I don't have the populations of
fact check us, Mikey. Google that.
Yeah, Mike, you type that in. Ask ChatGPT.
www.google.com.
Population rank of NFL team cities. So yeah, I mean, there you go. And it's just everyone needs to chill out with that. All right. I know the conversation's ongoing.
Look, I definitely, this is another point I'll concede on is having an operation like that, having so many people involved is very difficult to pull off. And so like to assume that the NFL has the capabilities of doing that is giving them too much credit, honestly, and the referees too much credit, because there are too many human elements, too many human errors that could have happened, and this could leak. I only bring this up because, and a lot of people are just hanging their hat on this big time because, one, we have gambling that's just growing and it's exploding across the country. So a lot of people are getting angry about ways, calls going certain ways and how that affects outcomes and so on and so forth. So that's an element to this. Secondarily, we do have evidence of there being referees taking things into their own hands and honestly getting drunk with the power that they have with the whistle in their hands, in their mouth. So like looking at the NBA, and I'm forgetting on the infamous dude, the ref.
I was just looking him up today. It's I gotta I'll pull up his name here.
Yeah, so like there is some like, look, it's happened before. To assume that it would never happen again is, I think, foolish. So like I get why people are getting frustrated and or at least questioning what's going on. And like I don't think that's a bad thing to always question it, because it keeps the referees and the officiating teams and the NFL honestly continuing to improve, right? Because they don't want that narrative about them if it's not true. So they're going to try and correct it in any way possible. So I think it's like a push and pull that's actually quite helpful to keep this thing moving forward. It's just when you start getting the anger and animosity coming through because people are losing money on betting, that's when it starts really amping up and elevating, which sucks.
Right. Yeah. The ref you were thinking of from the NBA is Tim Donaghy, and he actually served prison time, and he was, he admitted and pled guilty to fixing games, betting on his own games. And so there is historical, instances of this, precedents of this happening. However, that is the NBA. This is the NFL. I do love your point about the gambling stuff, dude, because this gets people extra emotional about it. Mm-hmm. The gambling, it elevates and it fuels the fire of the conspiracy theory here, because these people are now thinking, okay, there's so much money at stake, and that I actually think is just throwing gasoline on it and really, really allowing the conversation to get out of hands and unrealistic, because people are so emotional about the gambling. It's like, dude, the gambling has just become way too widespread, man. It's just way too accessible. It's way too prevalent. It's on every single show, every single platform. You see it all over the place. And I would actually argue that plays a bigger role in these conspiracy theories about the rigging of games or helping of the Chiefs than we would like to admit.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, from a business standpoint, I see why the NFL may be leaning into it a little bit, or I mean, they can't really first-handedly, but with all of the media outlets and everything supporting gambling and everything, I think the NFL sees it as a way to grow the fandom without being involved in it necessarily, because they can't be. Like, you can't be seen in the gambling world if you're the organization that's running the games and whatnot. But like, they see it as a way to grow the fandom into larger non-sports interested individuals, and then they have the opportunity to capture them and bring eyeballs to the sport. So they're using it as leverage to grow the game, right? But at the same time, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And that's what I think society is just, we're leaning into it a little too hard. And I think it's actually going to have a massive detriment to just the beauty of the game. You know, as you guys know, I'm more of the purist traditionalist in terms of like the beauty of the sport, sports at large, but football specifically. You know, I'm concerned about what effects that will have going into the future if this animosity and anger and this energy is all directed at like wins and losses of dollars versus just like the beauty of the sport and the competition on the field. So like, it is going to be a growing problem, and it's only going to become more so here in the near future.
Yeah, dude, that becomes way more prevalent and widespread and accessible. It will increase and become a bigger and bigger problem. I wonder if we don't look back here in about 20 years and equate this gambling sensation with the NFL of how we look at cigarettes in like the 1960s. It is a problem. It becomes addiction for young people, and not just young people, but for people. And it's just so widespread. It ends up being negative, and it's just being pushed so hard right now. Same way cigarettes were pushed back in the day. And I wonder if we're going to look at this in a similar fashion.
Look, 50, I'm not addicted. Okay, I can stop whenever I want. Okay, this next one though is a lock.
And there we have it. I think that's a good spot to end. So we can either cut that out or not.
Hey, did you ever find out what the metropolitan market of Kansas City, where it ranked?
It's 28th, actually.
Oh, even worse than we thought.
I'm insane
Even
at
worse.
guessing mid-market populations of cities in the Midwest United States.
It's
Nobody
your
can
best
touch
skill.
that. So, all right, I will. Let's end on that because that's a pretty cool that I got it that close. All right, guys, here we go. There we have it.